I would like to request the moderator and speaker of the working session 2, Future of the International Nuclear Arms Control and Non-Proliferation Regime, to take their seats on the stage. Our moderator and speakers truly need no introduction, given their esteemed backgrounds. However, for the benefit of the audience, I would like to take a moment to introduce them. Today's session will be moderated by Mr. Khalid Banouri. He is Senior Advisor, Project Phoenix. He was a fighter pilot and a flight instructor in the PAF with diverse interest in aviation, nuclear politics, arms control, training, education, international law, and outreach. Holding substantial experience in senior-level management, policy analysis, diplomacy, research, lecturing, and writing, a significant part of such pursuits included over 2 decades of expertise in arms control and diplomacy, including being the first Director General Arms Control and Disarmament Affair Branch at the Strategic Plans Division, and later at its first advisor on arms control and diplomacy. His outreach pursuits also include teaching at public sector universities, lecturing and publishing on a variety of diverse subjects. Ladies and gentlemen, our first speaker of the session is Dr. Tariq Rauf, who will be joining us virtually. Dr. Tariq Rauf is a former head of verification and security policy, alternate head of delegation to NPT conferences. Dr. Rauf is a former head of verification and security policy, alternate head of delegation to the NPT conferences. He was coordinator of IAEA multilateral approaches to the nuclear fuel cycle and was responsible for the IAEA Forum on Experience of Nuclear Weapon-Free Zones, relevant to the Middle East office. His areas of expertise include nuclear arms control, disarmament, safeguards, verification, global and regional nuclear non-proliferation, disarmament, nuclear security and safety, nuclear weapon-free zones, and multilateral approaches to the nuclear fuel cycle. Our second speaker of the session is Dr. Andrei Pavlov. Dr. Andrei Pavlov is the professor at St. Petersburg University and the chair of the master's program, Strategic and Arms Control Studies at the School of International Relations, where he teaches the courses on history of strategy, nuclear strategy, and arms control. He is also a graduate of St. Petersburg University, holds PhD in history. He is author of publications on various aspects of Russian national strategy, strategic stability, arms control, and he was also the co-editor of the book Nuclear Russia, International and Domestic Agenda, published in 2020. Our third speaker is Ms. Han Hua, joining us today online all the way from China. Ms. Han Hua is Associate Professor and Director of the Center of Arms Control and Disarmament at the School of International Studies, Peking University, China. She teaches courses in international arms control, disarmament, non-proliferation, and nuclear deterrence in South Asia, and also international relations theory. Ms. Han Hua is a visiting researcher at the Belfer Center, Howard University, USA, School of International Affairs, Georgia Institute of Technology, USA, Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, Sweden, and Stimson Center. As many of our speakers joining us are online, it seemed our virtual platform is giving us a true international flavor. With that, now I hand over the session to our esteemed moderator, Mr. Khalid Banouri, trusting his expertise to lead us through what promising to be an insightful and encouraging session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for this very generous introduction for all speakers. Welcome all panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, you have a very eminent panel here. Each individual has spent several years looking at these issues. I suspect that the discussions will also have some recurring themes that you heard since this morning. Some of those ideas about what is going to be the future of arms control and non-proliferation would have certain aspects like the geopolitical tensions, the way they are evolving, the technological advancements that are coming in, how does the multilateral cooperation work around, what are the disarmament initiatives, and how much of impetus can actually they get in this current environment, regional dynamics, of course, and overall, what is the level of awareness on the diplomacy for arms control, what is happening around here, and throw in then the impact of the climate change and the likely impact of climate change, what will happen. Perhaps the future of arms control and non-proliferation, if you will depend on a combination of three broad factors. The combination of strategic interests that several of these states, that especially those that have the nuclear capabilities of some kind, whether the nuclear weapons or the delivery system and so on and so forth, what is going to be the impact, and there's a bit of gray in this of the technological developments as they're coming along, and then the ability of the nations to navigate the complex geopolitical landscapes. And for this, you could have nothing better than this panel. We would, start with Dr. Taru Rauf, who has been introduced, although Tariq, welcome to this group, and you do not need an introduction here in this. Let's begin with at the beginning and see what Dr. Taru Rauf brings us. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, and I'm very pleased to join my distinguished panelists and commend the Strategic Vision Institute under the leadership of Dr. Naeem Saleh for convening this important conference in Islamabad. And may I say that I'm very pleased to see you, Dr. Khalid Benouri, in the chair today. I still remember coming to meet you in your office when you were heading up ACDA, and also the frank discussions in the corner office next door. Now, I understand that at this conference, there are speakers and participants both from Pakistan and from abroad. As such, it was surprising that the keynote by the chief of the JCS committee was blacked out for online participants. Okay, so may I commence my remarks by suggesting that the future iterations of this conference be titled Islamabad Nuclear Arms Control and Disarmament Conference. In my view, the term or concept of non-proliferation now has acquired a pejorative veneer. It was invented by the original proliferators of nuclear weapons and cleverly designated to malign other states seeking those same weapons. In other words, what is good for my security is not good for international security if in your hands. So something went wrong here as well, so I will go back to the trusted paper. We are living in dangerous times. The ongoing proxy war in Ukraine since February 2022 is raising the risks of possible use of battlefield nuclear weapons, but regrettably, the political and military leaders, as well as the echo chambers of academics and the media, in the warring and enabler states are blindly continuing eyes wide shut in raising the stakes and tempting fate of an accidental central strategic nuclear confrontation. Not that long ago, many military, political, and academic experts were raising the prospects of a catalytic nuclear war starting in South Asia, resulting in a global nuclear catastrophe. The reality is that despite several skirmishes, neither Pakistan nor India have targeted nuclear facilities, energy grids, critical infrastructure, or strategic military sites. But two nuclear superpowers have executed such actions in Iraq, Libya, Syria, and now in Ukraine. And now it is they, in their proxy war, who are tickling the tail of the Promethean nuclear fire dragon. Nonetheless, I do realize that in South Asia, there is what might be termed a continuing love affair with and confidence in nuclear weapons and nuclear deterrence, and disdain for some nuclear arms control measures and treaties. But understand that nuclear weapons and nuclear deterrence cannot be a viable long-term strategy for national, regional, or international security. In addition to destabilizing nuclear doctrines on nuclear weapons use, the UN disarmament machinery is also in disarray. The Conference on Disarmament, the Disarmament Commission, the First Committee, and the Non-Proliferation Treaty review process all are deadlocked. The UN Summit of the Future, which was held in New York on the 22nd and 23rd of September this year, agreed on a pact for the future. That regrettably was a big disappointment as it lacked any concrete actions, even though it paid lip service to the call that the time for total elimination of nuclear weapons is now. The document failed to reaffirm commitments to existing global nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation treaties, or to call for new ones to be negotiated. Notably, the late UN Secretary General Kofi Annan had referred to this state of affairs as mutual assured paralysis, and that the disarmament machinery is rusting. Now, coming to the collapse of nuclear arms control. Unfortunately, the vision of ridding the world of nuclear weapons is receding as the nuclear arms control architecture patiently built up over the past 50 years is collapsing before our eyes. Nuclear arms control fatigue is increasing, and in light of the Ukraine war, it even has become controversial. The only remaining nuclear arms reduction treaty in force between Moscow and Washington, the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, or New START, was signed on the 8th of April 2010, entered into force on 5th February 2011, was extended for 5 years in 2021, and now is hanging by a thread and shall expire on 4 February 2026. By 4 February 2018, both Russia and the United States had verifiably met the aggregate central limits of 1,550 accountable deployed strategic nuclear warheads and 700 deployed plus 100 non-deployed launches, that is, land and sea-based intercontinental ballistic missiles and strategic bombers. In the absence of New START, the September 2023 US inventory of about 662 deployed strategic launches with 1,419 nuclear warheads could be uploaded to about 3,570 nuclear warheads on 715 deployed strategic launches. For Russia, the March 2022 inventory of 1,458 warheads on 527 deployed strategic launches could be uploaded to 2,629 nuclear warheads on 533 deployed strategic launches. So without making new launches, there is this big upload capacity that exists in the two countries. A significant increase in the lethality and accuracy of US and Russian deployed nuclear forces has already impelled China to further increase its projected arsenal. China's nuclear buildup will in turn spur an increase in India's nuclear forces, leading to Pakistan also to increase its nuclear forces. Now, what are the prospects for Russia-United States arms control? For the first time in the more than 50-year history of the Soviet-Russian/US nuclear arms control, not only have existing agreements been dismantled, but both sides are modernizing nuclear arsenals unchecked, increasing their accuracy and lethality, and have lowered the threshold of nuclear weapon use in their declaratory and operational policies. No discussions are underway on bilateral nuclear arms control. Russia and the US are unlikely to reach an agreement on a formal treaty retaining current limits or imposing further reductions on their deployed nuclear forces before New START expires. Although the United States seems willing to move forward with negotiations, it is unclear whether these discussions can resume before the conflict in Ukraine ends. In June 2023, Jake Sullivan, the US National Security Advisor, said that rather than waiting to resolve all our bilateral differences, the United States is ready to engage Russia now to manage nuclear risks and develop a post-2026 arms control framework. Russia, however, has rejected this approach. Sergei Ryabkov, Russia's deputy foreign minister, has justified Russia's suspension of New START on the inability of circumstances related to the destructive and hostile actions of the United States. In response to Sullivan's statement, Ryabkov said that there is simply no basis for a productive discussion here, but we are ready to patiently state our approaches and to explain why the US force is destructive. And further, that there can be no engagement unless the United States and NATO abandon their policy of seeking the strategic defeat of Russia in Ukraine. Differences in US and Russian priorities for a treaty to replace New START further complicate their ability to complete a new treaty before February 2026. The US has suggested that the subsequent agreement sustain limits on the Russian systems covered under New START, limit new kinds of nuclear systems Russia is developing, and address all Russian nuclear weapons, including theater-range weapons. Russia, in contrast, wants the arms control process to cover the entire spectrum of offensive and defensive, nuclear and non-nuclear weapons with a strategic potential. This list includes offensive nuclear and conventional strategic weapons, ballistic missile defenses, space-based capabilities that could strike targets on Earth, and the nuclear weapons of the United Kingdom and France. Russia and the United States might find common ground if they seek to establish broad goals for cooperation while identifying specific measures to help manage risks and uncertainties created by their nuclear postures, but only after the end of the Ukraine war. Now, what are the prospects for China-United States arms control? US officials continue to raise concerns about China's growing nuclear arsenal and the potential that a regional crisis could spark a conflict that might escalate to nuclear war. In November 2021, President Putin invited China's President Xi Jinping to participate in a strategic stability dialogue that would establish guardrails to ensure that competition does not veer into conflict and to keep lines of communication open. According to the Biden White House, these talks would focus at first on avoiding accidental conflict, then on each nation's nuclear strategy and the related instability that could come from attacks in cyberspace and outer space, before eventually providing a venue for more formal arms control negotiations. China, however, has been reticent about joining strategic stability talks with the United States and has expressly rejected negotiations that would require transparency into or limits on its nuclear forces, citing the significant disparity between the numbers of Chinese, Russian, and US nuclear warheads. China has, in fact, embraced some forms of arms control, participating in multilateral negotiations and engaging in the so-called Permanent Five or P5 or Nuclear Five process, which brings together the 5 nuclear weapon states recognized by the Non-Proliferation Treaty to address nuclear security and non-proliferation issues. In this context, Beijing has advocated that for the 5 nuclear weapon states to further strengthen communication on strategic stability and conduct in-depth dialogue on reducing the role of nuclear weapons in their national security doctrine and on a broad range of issues, including missile defense, outer space, cyberspace, and artificial intelligence. The US government estimates that China's nuclear stockpile will grow to around 1,500 warheads by 2035. Some see this as an opening for arms control because the number would be similar to the New START limit of 1,550 deployed warheads on the Russian and US long-range delivery system. But the New START agreement does not count all US and Russian weapons. Their stockpiles contain around 3,700 and 4,000 nuclear warheads respectively. Thus, a Chinese buildup even to 1,500 warheads in 2035 would still leave China at a disadvantage. China might be willing to discuss the implications of its nuclear modernization program if the United States acknowledges that China's nuclear deterrent poses a credible threat to the US and places the two nations in a mutually vulnerable deterrence relationship. As a matter of policy, the US has long refused to acknowledge this reality, in part because it believes this could undermine allies' confidence in the US's extended nuclear deterrent. The absence of such an acknowledgement serves to convince China that the US is seeking absolute security rather than mutual deterrence with its nuclear weapons. Now, what might be some next steps? China, Russia, and the US are unlikely to accept restrictions on their numbers of deployed nuclear weapons as long as each continues to center nuclear weapons in its national security strategy, and all believe the threats in the current international security environment require an increase in the reliance and salience of nuclear weapons. Given the lack of any negotiations or discussions on nuclear arms control and stasis in the UN disarmament machinery, it is imperative of some form of strategic stability dialogue is established involving China, Russia, and the United States. As China now currently is coordinator of the P5 and I process, it could show maturity currently lacking in Moscow and Washington and set up a tripartite strategic stability dialogue to promote compartmentalization to enable mutual understanding of nuclear doctrines and strategic stability. I would suggest that the US-USSR joint communique signed in Moscow on 11 May 1972 would serve as a useful starting guidepost. In that communique, the two sides gave primary attention to reducing the danger of nuclear war, curbing the competition on strategic arms, and agreeing on basic principles on avoiding military conflict and not seeking military superiority. A new strategic dialogue would involve the 3 near-peer nuclear armed states to seek the following. 1, limit strategic missile defense capabilities. 2, agree on a verifiable ban on all nuclear-armed ground-launched and sea-launched cruise missiles. 3, avoid or limit commingling of nuclear and advanced conventional weapons on common delivery systems. To be clear, the terminology of entanglement is incorrect in this context. The correct term is commingling or intermingling. 4, revise nuclear doctrines away from early use of nuclear weapons. 5, limit emerging destabilizing technologies such as autonomous weapons, hypersonic missiles, nuclear-powered missiles, and offensive cyber capabilities. 6, limit generative and predictive artificial intelligence, that is, no integration with nuclear weapon command and control systems. Make no claims nor recognize claims of anyone else to any special rights or advantages in world affairs, and recognize and honor the sovereign equality of all states. 8, conduct individual fail-safe exercises to evaluate the robustness of nuclear weapons safety and security and command and control systems. And last, 9, prevent weaponization of space. A tall order, but a start must be made without further delay. Given time constraints, I shall only briefly elaborate on 2 of these proposals. The ongoing US and Russian reliance on their respective secure, reliable National Nuclear Risk Reduction Center in the case of the US and Nuclear Risk Reduction Center in the case of the Russian Federation to transmit ballistic missile launch notifications and other routine messages helps to clear up any potential misperceptions of strategic force movements on both sides and underscores the utility in limiting the chance of misinterpretation in this dangerous moment, thus reinforcing the original mission of avoiding inadvertent nuclear escalation. The modality of nuclear risk reduction centers to ensure stable, secure, and timely communications could become an essential aspect of mutual confidence building under the mechanism of the P5N5 process. A related concept to that of the risk reduction centers is that of fail-safe, to forestall the unauthorized, accidental, or mistaken use of nuclear weapons. Just as following the Fukushima nuclear accident in 2011, states operating nuclear power plants carried out reviews and stress tests of reactor emergency cooling and shutdown systems. Now, given rising tensions between some nuclear-armed states, including proxy wars, and the emergence of advanced and destabilizing technologies, the concept of fail-safe measures becomes more important. The nuclear-armed states need to conduct internal reviews of their nuclear weapon safety and security, command and control systems, including fail-safe steps to strengthen safeguards against warhead safety and security deficiencies, cyber threats, and unauthorized, inadvertent, or accidental use of nuclear weapons, including through false warning of a nuclear attack. Also required are assessments of the mental acuity and psychological stability of the top-tier political and military leadership. So to conclude, we urgently must rethink how we manage nuclear risks. Security based on nuclear deterrence is inherently flawed and risky and cannot continue on a long-term basis. A new international security system must be envisaged on the basic design principle that the effects of system failure cannot result to fundamentally disrupt or end civilization and to keep the nuclear genie firmly bottled up. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Tariq, for a very elaborate discussion on this. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Tariq Roof is one person out of a handful of people in this world that I personally start taking notes even when I have informal conversation. That's what I've done all these years. So if I was to just say the essence of what he has said is basically asking us rethink nuclear risk reduction. Rethink, because this is time to rethink about this. The way he's gone around this, they're very elaborate suggestions, some very, very daring ones, Tariq, I must admit, going for the jugular as well. But whatever is possible to go in that direction is something that we'll have to think about. Now it's my absolute pleasure to request Dr. Andrei Pavlov to give his version, and then we will perhaps see if there are, what are the similarities or dissimilarities in that. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to express my good feeling towards this invitation and thank SVI and Dr. Salik, first of all, for inviting me for that event. It's a pleasure and honor to be here and share my ideas. And I'm from St. Petersburg State University, so as my colleague from Moscow put it, it's view of Moscow, but not view from Moscow, but not of Moscow. And this is not even view from Moscow. So it's view from St. Petersburg, so it's my own view on the events. I'm a scholar, I'm a teacher, professor at the university, so I'm from academia, and I will try to be not very much academic, but I think academic view on what is going on in the field of arms control and non-proliferation can help us anyway to see the contemporary event in a broader say context, and to detect some long-term processes or short mid-term processes, which I believe will influence the development of the regimes in the sphere of arms control. And I would like to speak mostly about arms control multilateral. Okay, thank you. So it's better a little bit, probably. So I would concentrate first of all on multilateral arms control regimes, and not limited just by nuclear non-proliferation regime. Every arms control regime is based on is composed of two elements. One is kind of a background principles and norms, and the second element constructed on the basis of this norms and principles is a set of concrete rules, decision-making mechanisms, including organizations. Today, of course, decision-making procedures, concrete rules, etc. They are not stable, and they're not supposed to be stable. They have to adapt to the development of international situation, and this is something we witness now. Sometimes that's processes leading towards some positive changes, sometimes not. But still this is still about the concrete rules, not the basic principles. For example, there are some institutional changes, or changes of approaches, like, for example, state-level approach in International Atomic Energy Agency related to nuclear safeguards, or creation of new elements in Organization of Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, and, for example, the mechanism which was recently established in the regime in Biological Weapons Convention regime, prohibition of biological weapons, the Science and Technology Review process, for example. That seems to be quite positive, not always, but in general, because that can be that can make those regimes more, let's say, adapted to the present challenges which arms control faces and arms control regime, concrete arms control regimes face. Although there are some developments which we, which I think we cannot regard as positive changes, I would say. Although the demand for further institutional development in international security is quite clear and visible, the intensified rivalry between different states in the world, in Europe and Middle East and Asia-Pacific regions hampered further strengthening of global regulatory mechanisms. There is also an increase in geopolitical competition and rivalry between various coalitions and blocs. blocks of countries, groups of countries seeking to dominate international agenda and international affairs. This competition, of course, manifests itself in the desire to create new multilateral cooperation formats that could substitute the existing intergovernmental institutes, or at least intended to do it. This is kind of an attempt to replace traditional international law in the sphere of arms control by so-called soft law. And I wouldn't regard it as really a positive change, a positive trend, let's say, because that is usually connected to the attempts of certain countries and groups of countries, first of all, United States and US allies, to ensure, let's say, domination with the use of certain tactics which are related to pressure of different types of pressure tactics, including technological deterrence, certification procedures, pressuring by coercive economic, political measures, etc. This will introduce, or could introduce, regulatory mechanisms, regulatory codes, rules, and undermine the trust of international community and different countries in the existing rules. These novel soft law institutions founded by voluntary contributions will emerge alongside or adjacent to such classical hard law, traditional law formats as international organizations and agreements. And of course, that leads to the problem of legitimacy of such kind of alternative structures, which I think inevitably will be discriminatory. Structures, which means that we don't have to, they don't have to consider the interests of all concerned countries, of all sovereign countries which have legal or rightful concerns over the security. Another dangerous, I think, tendency is the attempt to substitute traditional diplomacy with a coalition of certain non-governmental organizations or non-governmental actors, which claim to be important and visible players in the international arena, especially in the sphere of arms control. Of course, the activity have a lot of positive elements, and we can assume that we can recognize their role. But I believe that there is an attempt to establish kind of a parallel or even to substitute traditional diplomacy, which I think would be counterproductive. The attempts to create coalitions of like-minded nations combined with coordinated security interests. Also, one of the new developments which I would not characterize as kind of a positive. Instead of continuing inclusive diplomatic dialogue based on the principles of reciprocity and equal and indivisible security for all sovereign states, some countries, first of all, Western players, together with their allies, they desire to create coalitions of like-minded countries, coalitions of willing, and again, let's say, promote the agenda in arms control, which does not take into account the interests of many important players in international arena, Last but not least, sorry. There is also some innovative approaches to verification of compliance. certain non-traditional ways to investigate the alleged cases of violation of existing norms, and attribute and all that based on open source intelligence or human intelligence, etc. That creates a serious risk of manipulating public opinion, because that is first of all aimed at public opinion, and sometimes on not very well informed public, let's say. The extent to which non-governmental organizations and social movements are drawn into geopolitical confrontation today is a matter of significant concern. Okay, so to sum up, I believe that the basic principles and norms of arms control regimes are still quite important, and there are some threats of their undermining, of their destruction, but still they are visible, and the countries, they regard it as a value. And this conference, I think, is a proof that arms control, non-proliferation is a value in international affairs, and we can see how Pakistan is interested in promoting those principles in the future, even being outside of the nuclear non-proliferation regime, still value nuclear non-proliferation. But there are and the changes we witness and tendencies we witness, they are visible on the level of concrete norms and rules, concrete rules and decision-making mechanisms. But these negative developments, I believe, are threatening to the basic level, to the level of principles. So that in the future it is possible that some countries or many countries in the world will not value the very basic principles of arms control and non-proliferation anymore. I formulated four threats, four dangers of that type. First, protectionism, combined with the distrust of national elites towards international institutions of global governance, can provoke states to withdraw from international arms control agreements. So if a country does not value the principle of arms control, that arms control is important, it should be promoted and preserved, then some countries losing the interest for traditional arms control regimes would be interested to, let's say, stay aside of it. Secondly, there is a possibility of prolonged stagnation of arms control diplomacy and the absence of advancement in the matter of universalization and entry into force of international agreements, such as comprehensive test ban treaty, nuclear test ban treaty, of course. The absence of progress in that area in negotiations in traditional diplomatic process might create kind of a disappointment, a general disappointment, which could influence governments and political decision-making. The lack of progress, and in this area, progress can never be very quick. It takes time, of course, but the lack of progress can lead to dissatisfaction in the societies and development of negative, say, attitude toward arms control in general. Thirdly, the institutional strength of non-proliferation regimes may be weakened due to the budget deficit, which is getting worse and worse in all the regimes. And fourthly, there is a decrease in transparency and trust among the states, and their transparency in first of all, in the field of arms control and non-proliferation regimes. And this challenge is not relevant only for Russia, US bilateral arms control. This is a kind of a typical problem for many, if not all, international multilateral arms control regimes. Thank you for your attention, and I will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Andre, for a very insightful expose. I was just, if I was to take one personal takeaway from your thing, was the no matter the imperfections or challenges that it faces, the role of the traditional arms control diplomacy must be sustained. So that's the kind of thing takeaway that I have from your presentation. But first, they are very elaborate points, and then those will come into a discussion further. Now, it's my pleasure to invite our panel speaker, Dr. Han Hua, who also does not need any introduction. After her presentation, we would then get into a discussion session. Madam, you have the floor now. Can you hear us clearly? Can you hear us, Madam?
Hi, the line is not that good, so I didn't hear Mr. Chairman's song, but now I can hear. I would like to deliver my presentation by elaborate the concept of the great power rivalry, because I think that's a very important concept, or the very important background when they talk about the current arms control and non-proliferation issues and problems. This term of the great power rivalry was used by Trump administration's national security strategy in 2017, as you may know. And in this document, the statement says, as I quoted, after being dismissed as a phenomena, I couldn't.
Yes, so we have your,
I could really,
which actually shows the Trump administration's policy and the Biden administration's policy. We can see.
Now it's a little bit clear for me. I can read the characters.
Okay.
So after being dismissed as a phenomenon of an earlier century, the great power competition returned. This document also identified China and Russia as the U.S. strategic competitors. And I also look at the similar document, the National Security Strategy in 2022, Biden administration's document. I can see that now. The Biden administration's national security strategy also talk about the times of great change and a time for competition between the major powers. In this document, China, for the first time, was identified as the only competitor with both the intent and power to reshape the international order. China also was identified as the U.S. most consequential geopolitical challenge. Russia was identified as an immediate threat to the free and open international system. Next slide, please.
And there are three main points. Conventional replacing unconventional security has returned as the main theme of IR. Geopolitics amongst the major states has intensified significantly. Flashpoints of confrontation in regions. And the third point is the new dynamics of balance of power have emerged, build-up of conventional nuclear new technologies capabilities, realignment among countries and reassurance arrangements and alliances, and deployment of armed forces. That's what this slide says. Would you like to say something, or shall we go to the next one?
Yeah, you please read the next one. Or maybe I can read from my own iPad.
Okay. So the next slide is challenges to arms control and non-proliferation. And you're basically talking about arms control, the role of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, the challenge, first I would like to talk about the challenges toward arms control. Yes. 3 points I made here. The first one is the role of nuclear weapons. I have already seen the increasing role of nuclear weapons and lowering the threshold of the nuclear weapons use. For example, we can talk about the nuclear weapon states, nuclear postures, and nuclear doctrines. We can see the changes. And also we have already seen the potential use of nuclear weapons in war fighting. All people around the countries, they talk about the limit nuclear war scenarios. So all these signs are not very encouraging. The second challenge toward arms control is the collapse of arms control regime. Dr. Ruff just mentioned that. I also think most all the treaties and agreements reached and signed by the U.S. and Soviet Union in the Cold War era, and after most of them have already dismissed, and also only the New START Treaty is the last remaining bilateral arms control agreement, but still in a very fragile status. And also we have already seen the potential arms race in strategic and unstrategic capabilities in the major countries. When we talk about non-strategic capabilities, we talk about AI. Some speakers have already mentioned this, and cyber, and also the outer space capabilities are also in the process of rapid development. And especially when we talk about the new types of nuclear and missile capabilities, and we have already seen a new round of missile testing in recent years. The third challenge is escalation risks. We have already seen some countries have taken action such as attacking or threatening to attack nuclear facilities and strategic assets in some countries. The nuclear early warning radars, for example. And the challenge toward non-proliferation regime. For me, I think the general problem is that should they pursue our own geopolitical objectives, or they should pursue non-proliferation interests? That is a kind of balance. We cannot really find the good way.
So you recommend non-proliferation diplomacy?
This problem in specific way. We have already seen the non-proliferation diplomacy has not been successful in recent years. For example, the NPT review conferences in last 2 decades, no final documents came out after the discussion at UN. And also we have seen the almost a collapse of the JCPOA after the Trump withdrew from that treaty. The action plan. The second challenge toward the non-proliferation regime is the extended nuclear deterrence arrangement. For example, we talk about the new very big change in the nuclear sharing arrangement in Asia Pacific, especially between the United States and South Korea, and some extended between the US and Japan. And also when we talk about extended nuclear deterrence, we say some proliferation of missile defense systems, and sometimes, especially in recent years, some offensive missile deployment in Asia Pacific or in other parts of the world. The third challenge toward the non-proliferation regime is the geopolitics in non-proliferation organizations. For example, we have already seen some politicalization in IAEA, that some kind of debate, or when they talk about AUKUS, the sale of a submarine technology or materials, Navy, the weapon grade materials, with the sales of the nuclear submarines. So let me summarize the general challenges toward arms control and non-proliferation. The first one is nuclear dynamics in insecurity paradox, especially very concerned about the escalation ladders. Ladders have already created in the gap between the strategic levels, kind of a stability, but the low intensity conflicts or conventional conflicts. And also, I have already seen the erosion of the norm of unthinkable of nuclear use. We used to have that norm for some time. The third problem is the gray zone, my own term, the gray zone proliferation. That means you don't necessarily to violate the NPT treaty per se, but some actions taken by countries violating the norms created with the NPT treaty. So what we can do in a very dangerous moment, I think 3 points I would like to share with our distinguished speakers and guests. The first one is nuclear for deterrence only, that concept, and also the concept of stability inside the nuclear primacy could be considered as the keys in nuclear thinking and decision-making in nuclear weapon states. The second area I think we can work together is collaborating on avoiding any actions that may lead to escalation. I think that is dearly needed at this moment. Lastly, I think the P5 or N5 process or dialogues on strategic stability is an important approach to cope with challenges both toward strategic stability and to non-proliferation regime. Thank you very much. Let me stop here. I'm looking for your comments and questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hanhua, for tackling successfully through all these technical glitches and giving us the sense. May I take the liberty to say, in a broad sense, the takeaways that I took from your presentation, 3 or 4 points.
I cannot hear.
Consistent policies that have come out from United States are incrementally seeing Russia and China as the enemy countries. Then you also talked about the escalation risks, the threat to attack the nuclear assets. You also talked about the need or relevance of the various alliances, including some of those which are evolving. And you threw in the gray zone ambiguities which complicate the issue, and finally the recommendation for cooperation and dialogue, which will actually help stabilize that situation. Thank you for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard three eminent speakers. You heard some themes which are recurring, and you heard some aspects which were different. Now is the time to draw blood through a question answer session. We have some time. Let me take one round, and I'll take these 4 questions, and then we'll see if we have time for another one. We go in this order: you, sir, and after you, and the third and the fourth. That's right. Yes, please. Either mic de dein. Whoever is going to speak, please identify yourself with your institutional affiliation, and please tell who the question is addressed to in the panel. The 2 other panelists are also online and they are listening.
I am Zahir Kazmi. I am Sir Banori's student. 3 questions. First one for Andrei Pavlov. What has Russia gained from the non-proliferation regime? Your good behavior has not been reciprocated, and Moscow had to lately de-ratify the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. And there are signals that North Korea, India, and some other state may resume nuclear testing. This will send or push back arms control a bit back more. So what is your response or comment on that? The second question is to Ms. Hanhua. I was struck by the last point in your PowerPoint presentation, where you wrote down something about AUKUS. What would be your views on if AUKUS is replicated, let's say, between India and France? How will it affect the arms control, and how will it affect strategic stability? And lastly, to Dr. Tariq Rauf, sir, strategic stability, I think, is lame. It has lost its leg of arms control, and deterrence is the overgrowing leg. I want to draw on what you said about emerging and disruptive technologies. Will these, in your reckoning, affect the arms control regime in a manner that till the time these mature into military systems, you will not find anyone on the arms control table? Thank you.
With the indulgence of the panelists, I would like to take all 4 questions first and then seek your answers. Thank you. The gentleman in the pink shirt.
And pink socks. Ejaz Haider. I've been a newspaper man, currently kind of unemployed. My question primarily is to Professor Han. So years ago, one of the Chinese experts, Li Bin, spoke about verifiable no first use policy, which had 3 or 4 different factors. But one of the important things that he spoke about was the fact that the Chinese policy is not launch on warning, it's not launch under attack, it's launch after attack. But interestingly enough, now that the modernization has begun, and recently there was this Carnegie publication called Chinese Nuclear Thinking, which was edited by Li Bin and Tong Zhao. And it talks about the fact that one of the vulnerabilities, of course, is technical lagging. Then there are internal threats that China basically factors in terms of how it has to respond to security challenges. And thirdly, and very interestingly, and I had a discussion with Tong on movement away from the previous policy of a response after attack Is the no first use policy still relevant? And finally, you talked about a nuclear dialogue. To the best of my knowledge, the Americans have been trying to draw the Chinese into a dialogue, but China has so far refused to do that on the basis of the fact that China still lags behind Russia and the United States, if not in terms of technologies, then in terms of numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. I am Dr. Zafar. My question and comment, the first part is directed to Dr. Andre, and the second part of my question, I would request Dr. Tariq Rauf to respond to that. Looking at the history of arms control and disarmament, I am not going into the history of arms control and disarmament in any case, but all these treaties and regimes came into being to create sort of certainty and stability, that is, to create sort of peace, resulting from the geopolitical and geostrategic rivalry of great powers. Why is that the current environment or the contemporary geostrategic environment causing a collapse instead of creating or strengthening, creating new regimes or strengthening the existing regime? And secondly, the second part, which is directed to Dr. Tariq Rauf. Sir, do you foresee any regulatory regime coming up as a result of the lethality brought in by the new technologies, especially the pagers and other commercial communication equipment being exploding and causing a lot of casualties and destruction? So do you foresee that in the near future, there would be a sort of regulatory regime coming up on the use of artificial intelligence or regulating cyberspace, lethal autonomous weapons, etc.? Thank you very much, sir.
Last question for this set. Wahan de dein piche mic.
Thank you so much, my teacher. This is Noreen Iftikhar, non-resident research fellow of SPI. I have a very brief question, and it will be directed to Dr. Tariq Rauf. Sir, how you see the rise of circumstantial alliances and extra-regional forces, and how it will impact the non-proliferation and strategic stability in the longer run? Thank you.
Thank you. Now there's a fairly large menu on the questions. May I request, Andre, you to first answer the questions that are addressed to you, and perhaps even those that you want to pick on, otherwise is okay also a lot.
Thank you. If I understand correctly, please tell me if I'm wrong. The first question was about why Russia still value NPT, or yeah. Well, yes, Russia still values NPT, and maybe even more than previously. Although previously it was also a great value for Russia, because I think, and I think I share that view. It's not only official; it's my personal view, that say poorly regulated environment is anyway better than a chaos. So if we say that yes, there are problems, weakening and of the regime, mistrust is growing, and functioning of the regime is not perfect, and there are violations, etc. It's anyway better than nothing, than a chaotic, say, environment. So we can have a background which would, I think, allow us to do something maybe in the future when the situation will change and it will be possible to, let's say, move forward in that. This is the short answer and most general answer. And I think more specific for Russia would be that in the regime, at least, Russia can do something. can be, and Russia is influential actor in the regime, and can influence, to a certain extent, always can influence that development. So it's not just a kind of a not regulated area where Russia want to defend its own interests with only own resources, etc. It is still better than that. So that will be my answer to that question. Concerning the collapse of the regimes yeah, that's a very, I would say, widespread idea. Why we don't have functional regimes when we most need it, when we need it the most, when there is a kind of a crisis, when crisis elements in international affairs they grow, and in that area we need arms control and regulations more than in normal time, in time of peace and in the time of, let's say, lowering tensions. We always ask that question. But I would not, first of all, I would divide it into two parts. I wouldn't say that international multilateral arms control regimes, they collapse. Because yes, there is a crisis, many of them, and some developments we believe is quite controversial or maybe negative. But those multilateral regimes, they still function. They still do something. Maybe they are not ideal. They are not doing everything they're supposed to do. But again, as in the case of the NPT, it's better to have them. And I think it's a general view that we still have to support at least the background of the regimes, because they are useful anyway. And it's better to have them than have nothing. Speaking about bilateral Russia-US, which is close to collapse, I mean, Russia-US nuclear strategic forces arms control regime, which is about to collapse because we have just one treaty which will expire very soon, in a bit more than 1 year. I think that in this situation, we see that previously, when the negotiations just started and they continued for decades between Soviet Union first and Russia and the United States, both sides regarded itself as equal partners, like equally important, and were ready to take into account the interests, not share, of course, not support, but take into account the interests of the opposite side, which is not the case today, I think, because I don't think US partners in this sense, I will use the word partners because Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs use this word in this case of Russia-US arms control. They are not ready to, say, take into account Russia's interests. And this is not possible to continue. So it was for a long time when Russia tried to do something about that, but still it's not the case. And I think when in this area, at least, not totally, but in this area, that mutual, let's say, understanding of the interests will be reestablished, if it will happen. That will change the situation for better.
Thank you. Dr. Han Hua, would you like to take the questions that came your way?
Thank you very much for those very insightful questions and also some comments. I only heard the two questions, so I try to answer those two questions. The first one, we talked about the French-India submarine cooperation. I know in the beginning, after the AUKUS declared that there were going to be a cooperation and also some sharing and some sales from the United States or Great Britain's submarine technology or nuclear-driven submarines themselves to Australia. I noticed that India showed some interest, also trying to get the transfers. Only some media reports talk about that, but I didn't see any response from the AUKUS, that group of countries. But at the same after that, French showed his interest in selling the conventional driven submarines to India, and I assume they have already conducted some kind of negotiations on these transfers or cooperation. So this definitely, from an arms controller's point of view, is not good news, because any submarines capability around the world is not good for regional stability, definitely. But I cannot say the normative judgment is good or not, because it is a kind of demonstration of, as Dr. Rolf just mentioned, is a kind of a proliferation chain. Not only nuclear weapons or technology, but also the missile technologies or submarines technologies, or the submarines themselves too. So that's my my answer to that question. The second one is about with the growing number and also some technologies advancement in Chinese nuclear build-up or nuclear modernization. Some people say maybe China would like, as the DOD's annual report talking about, maybe China has already been in the position as the long-term warning poster, rather than still, we still think there's a no alert or low alert status of nuclear posture. But for me, I think even for the growing capability of Chinese nuclear weapons and missile capabilities, I still think the policy of no force use still will be consistent in the foreseeable future. But myself, my personal view, I still think it's important for me is to tell who are the non-nuclear states. So we have to have a more clearly identified who are the non-nuclear states. That's really my personal view. If your nuclear sharing with the equipment, or maybe that's a complicated definition of who are the nuclear have-nots.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Tariq Rauf, can I take the liberty to ask you to be as crisp in your answers as you can be? This panel is standing frightfully between this audience and the lunch. And I know that we just have a few minutes. So I know you can do this, but please answer the question that were addressed to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to report that I was just reading a report out of Moscow that Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko confirmed that the nuclear risk reduction hotline between Moscow and Washington is still operative. They have a deconfliction channel as well. So this is a good sign under the current situation. So the question that was asked to me by Dr. Zafar and also by Mr. Zahir Kazmi, I'll answer the question by Mr. Kazmi first, which, as I understand, was about arms control and strategic stability. There is no agreed definition of strategic stability. Strategic stability means whatever it means to whoever is the one who is using that term. The same thing goes for undiminished security for all. We find these terms used very liberally in various documents, but there has never been an agreed understanding other than avoidance of nuclear war. With these new technologies, there are no guardrails. This is first mover advantage. At the conference held in Vienna in April by the Austrian Foreign Ministry on autonomous weapons, the technology holders did not want any guardrails. Their view was the same as the National Rifle Association in Washington. These technologies don't kill people, people kill people. So the issue is not controlling the technology, but who has this technology. And in that context, I would like that if there's one message coming out of this conference, please stop using this word of non-proliferation. It's done. Those countries that needed to make nuclear weapons have already made them. Those who wanted to be threshold states have already acquired that capability. Our focus now should be on nuclear arms control and disarmament. Non-proliferation was an old term, as I explained in my earlier comment, and I don't want to elaborate on that. Dr. Kazmi also referred to Russia de-ratifying the CTBT. So the statement made here by the Russian permanent representative, Mikhail Ulyanov, is that Russia has only done what the United States already did in 1999 when it rejected ratification. And now Russia is in the same position as China and the US as having signed the treaty but not ratified it. Russia completed its last international monitoring system in its territory last December. It is continuing to provide data to the International Data Center at the CTBT organization. It continues to be a member of the CTBT. So there is no change in that other than it's formally not ratified it. It doesn't mean it's preparing to test. But nonetheless, this is still a negative development. I also wanted to talk about AUKUS because the person who has done the most work on AUKUS and nuclear submarines is me, going back all the way to 1988. Also, we need to deal with these geostrategic hallucinations of using concepts like Quad, Indo-Pacific, AUKUS, and so on. These are all deeply flawed, and we should not fall into the trap of using this terminology unquestioningly. With regard to the India-France agreement or US agreement on providing nuclear submarines, unfortunately, it's different because Australia is a non-nuclear weapon state party to the NPT, and it will exempt nuclear material from safeguards, which it is required to put under safeguards. India, unfortunately, the Soviet Union and the Russian Federation are the guilty parties here. They already shared nuclear submarine technology with India. India has copied that technology. Its nuclear submarines are based on Russian Soviet design, and we need to hold Russia accountable for that. So getting new technology from France is very different because it's not a party to the NPT. But nonetheless, for Pakistan, it's an issue. And if I were Pakistan, I would be knocking on the doors on Beijing, asking for nuclear submarine technology for Pakistan as well, or India to get it. There's a lot more to say, but I will stop there, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for these answers, ladies and gentlemen. Those who wanted to ask questions, I apologize to you. Please engage Andre over lunch, and there are more sessions, and you will be able to deal with them. As a just closing sense of what are the takeaways, I just need about 45 minutes to tell you about the takeaways. That is that long. So let me just say 2 or 3 sentences. The future of arms control is complicated because it is nebulous. There's a lot of fuzziness around this. the ongoing conflicts around the world now, the very burning conflicts in Palestine and in Ukraine, have nuclear weapon states as parties, one way or the other. So there are these issues that need to be grappled. Such conversations are very, very important because they need to be taken into more deeper reflections. So that's an important thing. But on a somber thing, if the world community is not very serious on such dialogues, the history tells you World War I, 17 million, World War II, 60 million. Are we going to wait till that time when something like this happens? And then you start to think more of arms control. The time is now. Thank you very much for your attention. Please join me in an applause to our online participants as well as to Dr. Andre. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you to our speakers for sharing your invaluable insights, and especially to Dr. Rauf and Dr. Hanhua for handling all the technological glitches with patience and grace. And I would like to extend my gratitude to our worthy moderator for completing this session successfully. I would request Dr. Naeem Ahmed Salik to please give conference mementos. First, I would like to request Dr. Andrei Pavlov to receive his memento. Thank you so much. Thank you. You saved the session. Now I would like to request our moderator, Mr. Khalid Binouri, to receive his memento.